Open your fridge right now. Take a good look at what's in there. Maybe some leftover pasta, a block of cheese, a can of something with a pull tab, some fruit that's been sitting there just long enough that you're not totally sure about it anymore. Now imagine showing all of that to a human being from 100,000 years ago. Not a primitive grunt and point creature. A fully modern human. Same brain, same nervous system, same capacity for language and problem solving and abstract thought. They would have no idea what they were looking at. Not one single item in that fridge would register as food. And the things they actually ate every day would make most people alive today physically gag. So let's go there. Because the story of what our ancestors actually put in their mouths is one of the strangest, most revealing, most uncomfortably familiar stories in all of human history. Let's start somewhere that might surprise you. 100,000 years ago, your ancestors were not the first humans on this planet. They were actually fairly late to the game. Homo sapiens had been walking around Africa since roughly 300,000 years ago. But the dietary habits those early humans inherited were already millions of years old by the time they picked them up. You have to understand something important here. The menu your species was working from didn't get invented by Homo sapiens. It got handed down and adjusted and inherited from creatures that barely looked like you. And the very first item on that menu was not what you'd expect. It was not meat, it was not fruit. It was the contents of bones that other animals had already finished with. Here's the picture. 3 million years ago, on the African savanna, a lion takes down a wildebeest. The lion eats the choice cuts. The hyenas move in and crunch through everything else. By the time your ancestors arrived, what was left was thick leg bones. Femurs. The kind of bones no hyena jaw is powerful enough to crack. And your ancestors had exactly one trick that no other scavenger had. Hands. Hands that could grip a rock hard enough to smash those bones open. What spilled out was marrow. Gray, dense, dripping with fat. It was also, calorie for calorie, one of the richest foods on the planet. And for over 1 million years, that was the signature meal. Not a backup option. Not a last resort. The main event. They ate brains too. A cracked human or animal skull contains close to a pound of solid fat. Fat is the most calorie-dense food that exists in nature. And in a world where calories were the only currency that actually mattered, a skull was wealth. This is not a small detail. This is why your body still treats fat like something precious. It still carries the memory of what fat actually meant. It meant survival. It meant making it through to the next day. The biological reward system your brain runs when you eat something rich and fatty is not a modern glitch. It's a million-year-old inheritance from ancestors who would have done genuinely alarming things for a good source of calories. Now, here's where the story gets genuinely interesting. Around 1 million years ago, something changed. We found fire. Or more accurately, we started controlling it. The oldest confirmed evidence of a human-managed fire is roughly 1 million years old inside Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. Burned bone and plant ash, concentrated in a way no wildfire could explain. Sustained. Deliberate. And once you have fire, you have cooking. And cooking, as it turns out, is basically the most consequential technological development in the entire history of the human species. More important than the wheel. More important than writing. Possibly more important than anything else you could name. Think about what cooking actually does. It's pre-digestion. Raw meat forces your gut to spend enormous amounts of energy breaking down proteins and fibers. Cooked meat is already partly dismantled. Your body pulls more calories from every bite, using less energy to do it. And scientists now believe that as our ancestors started cooking regularly, their digestive systems shrank. Shorter guts meant freed up energy. And that freed up energy went somewhere. It went directly to the brain. The human brain runs on about 20% of your body's total caloric budget. You cannot build a machine like that on raw leaves and scavenged scraps. But roasted meat over coals, roots buried in hot ash, marrow bones dropped in embers, that's a different calculation entirely. Cooking didn't just change what we ate. It built the brain you're using right now. To think about this. By 300,000 years ago, the menu had exploded in every direction. Your ancestors at this point looked essentially like you. They were hunting mammoths, bison, wild horses, and reindeer across open plains. They were pulling fish and shellfish from rivers and coastlines. They were digging up roots, cracking nuts, foraging wild grains, stealing eggs from nests, and most enthusiastically of all, raiding beehives for honey. The Hadza people of Tanzania, who still live as hunter-gatherers today, get about 15% of their total calories from wild honey. They climb dangerous trees. They get stung hundreds of times. They keep going back. Nothing else in the natural world packs that many calories into one concentrated source. And that craving, that specific, almost irrational pull toward concentrate, sugar, is still running in you right now. Your brain cannot tell the difference between ancient honey from a tree and a can of soda. It sees the same signal. Modern food just figured out how to exploit that signal at industrial scale. But let's talk about meat, because this is where 100,000 years ago gets genuinely extreme. A single mammoth could feed a tribe for weeks. One successful hunt saved hundreds of hours of foraging, root digging, and insect catching. Think about what that saved time actually meant. It meant time to raise children properly, to teach skills, to make better tools, to tell stories around fires at night. The reason your body still craves protein, still responds to the smell of roasting meat with something close to euphoria, is because protein and fat from large animals was the highest value food in the human world for an extraordinarily long time. Every major surge in human brain development tracks with increased access to animal fat and protein. Now, let's explore a chapter of your ancestry that remains largely unknown to most. Your ancestors ate insects regularly, enthusiastically. Termites, grubs, beetle larvae as thick as your thumb. They crunched like shrimp. They're dense in protein, fat, and calories. For your deep ancestors, insects were not a weird alternative food for adventurous people. They were just food. Tuesday food. The most available and reliable food source in many environments. And here's the thing that should genuinely unsettle you a little. The disgust you feel about this right now, that's cultural, that's recent. That's not 100,000 years old. The preference for eating insects is the old program. The disgust is the new one. And then there's the part of this story that nobody wants to talk about. In a cave in England called Gough's Cave, researchers found human bones roughly 14,700 years old. The bones had been meticulously processed, skulls cleaned, faces removed, shaped into cups, long bones cracked open exactly the way your oldest ancestors cracked antelope bones for marrow. And here's what makes this genuinely disturbing. It wasn't starvation. The same cave contains the remains of horses, deer, and other animals. There was plenty to eat. A single bison provides around 600,000 calories. A human body provides about 125,000. This wasn't efficiency. It wasn't desperation. It was a choice. Gough's Cave isn't alone either. Similar evidence has been found in Germany, France, Spain, and Croatia. For hundreds of thousands of years, across different continents, this was happening. And in at least some cases, the bones were carved with decorative patterns after the flesh was gone. Which means at some point, it stopped being about hunger entirely. Let's talk about fermentation, because this is the one that sneaks up on you. Your ancestors could not preserve food easily. A successful hunt meant excess meat, and excess meat meant rot, so they buried it. Stashed it in cold streams, packed it into caves, cached it in the ground for days or weeks or months. By the time they came back for it, the meat was already decomposing, and they ate it anyway. Some researchers believe they may have actually preferred it that way. Partially decomposed meat is already broken down by bacteria. Easier to chew, easier to absorb. The bacteria produce B vitamins your body genuinely needs. Now look at what you consider delicious today. Aged cheese, fermented yogurt, sourdough bread, wine, beer, soy sauce, kimchi, pickles. Every single one of those is lead rot. Your taste for them didn't develop in some European kitchen or ancient brewery. It developed on a savanna consuming something considerably less refined. Here's something worth sitting with for a second. Every craving you experience today for fat, for salt, for sugar, for the richest, most calorie-dense thing you can get your hands on, every single one of those cravings was shaped by a world where any of those things could disappear entirely tomorrow. Your body doesn't know about refrigerators. It doesn't know that the grocery store will be open again tomorrow morning. It's running code that was written in a world where the next meal was genuinely uncertain, where winters killed people who weren't carrying enough body fat, where a dripping honeycomb was the most extraordinary thing most of your ancestors ever found. The program doesn't update just because the world does. And here's the part that puts all of this in the most uncomfortable possible perspective. If you dropped a modern human into the landscape of 100,000 years ago, they would almost certainly die within days. You would not know which plants were safe. You would not be strong or skilled enough to take down large animals. You would not know how to read animal trails, find hidden water, or identify which insects were nutritious versus which ones were quietly lethal. You would stand in a landscape full of food and see nothing. But if you took a person from 100,000 years ago and walked them into a modern supermarket, they would think they had stepped inside something divine. Sealed cold meat, fruit from places that don't exist in their geography, bread someone else made. Dense, sweet things in infinite supply with no danger attached to getting them. For 3 million years, every human who ever lived spent enormous amounts of time and energy and risk just trying to eat. And for most of that time, bone marrow, insects, honey, rot, and the occasional extraordinarily dangerous large animal were the best options on the table.